Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's study in our series of Spiritism viewed through transpersonal psychology. I am Fabrício Assunção from the Spirit Society of Bournemouth. These studies are an international collaboration between the Spiritist Society of Bournemouth in England, the Brazilian Spiritist Medical Association, and the Spiritist Institute from the United States of America. Our guest speakers will look at Spiritism connection with human psychology, focus on the teachings of Allan Kardec and Joanna de Angelis. This evening, we are honored to have our speakers, Adriana Lopes and Guadalupe Amaral. They will give their talk in Portuguese. We are also very pleased to have with us Dr. Dana Sisi from the Spiritist Institute, who will give us simultaneous translate into English. The themes of tonight's talks is sleep and dreams and the dynamics of the psyche. It refers to the Spirits books by Allan Kardec, Part 2, Chapter 8, The Emancipation of the Soul. So let me have a few words about our distinguished speakers. Adriana is a doctor of philosophy, a Jungian analyst, and clinical psychologist. She is a member of the Jungian Association of Brazil, the Jungian Institute of Paraná, and the International Association for Analytical Psychology. She is also a lecturer in postgraduate courses in psychology and a researcher at the Psychology and Spiritist Center of the Medical Spiritist Association of Brazil. Guadalupe is a medical doctor and a Jungian analyst. He's an author and a speaker of the psychological series of Joanna de Angelis with the Spiritist Medical Association of Brazil and the Brazilian Spiritist Federation. Amongst her many qualifications, Guadalupe has postgraduate degree in health, spirituality, and Jung clinical psychology. She is also a member of the International Association for Analytical Psychology, the Department of Analytical Psychology and Spirituality of the Brazilian Jungian Association, and the Spirituality Group of Jung Institute of Rio Grande do Sul. Dr. Dan Assisi is our language translator tonight. He has a doctorate degree in education and has a distinguished record of service to the Spiritist movement. Dan is a founding member of the Spiritist Institute in the USA. He is also an author and gives public talks on the spirituality and spiritism in the USA and internationally. It's now my pleasure to hand it over to our three guest speakers for tonight on the theme of sleep and dreams and the dynamic of the psyche. Over to you, Adriana, Guadalupe, and Dan.
Certo. Bem, para aqueles que não ouviram
So for those of
antes,
you who may
a
not
gente
have
tá
heard this
trazendo
before,
a importância do sono,
we are talking
que não
about
é
the
só
importance
momento
of
onde o
sleep,
corpo
which is not
simplesmente
only the moment in
apaga,
which the
e
body
sim
turns off,
momento onde não só
but a
nós
moment
nos
in which we
restauramos
restore
fisicamente,
ourselves,
nós também temos
where
trocas
we have these
psicológicas,
psychological
experiências
exchanges and
espirituais.
spiritual
Ele
experiences.
estava falando então
And so
desse
I was
sono,
saying about this
dessa
this
fase do
phase
sono,
of
a qual
sleep,
nós vamos nos
and
ocupar
which we're going to
mais
focus
no
on
nosso
today,
encontro de hoje,
which is
é a
called the
fase
REM sleep.
vem
And
diretamente
REM
do
comes from
impacto
rapid
dos
eye
sonhos.
movement, which is what
É a
happens
fase
during
do
that
sono
moment
mais
to our bodies.
profundo,
It is the
onde
deeper
então se tem
state
uma
of sleep
série de
where
alterações
we face a
fisiológicas,
series of
e é
physiological
justamente
changes while we're
nessa
sleeping.
fase do
And
sono
exactly in this
que ocorrem
phase
as atividades cerebrais
that
importantes para
the
a
brain
memória e o
activities take place that are
aprendizado.
important for memory and learning.
É uma parte pequena
It is
do ciclo
a
de
small
sono,
part of the
mas de
cycle of
grande
sleep,
importância.
but it's very important.
Representa
And
25% do
it generally
total do
represents about
sono,
25% of an
e é
individual's
nessa
total sleep.
fase que ocorrem
And
os
this is when
sonhos.
dreams take place.
A gente sabe que podemos ter essas
We know
fases,
that
esse
these
ciclo de
cycles,
sono, 4 vezes,
for
5
perhaps
vezes por
5
noite.
per night,
Cada
and
ciclo
each one of these
se
cycles
medirá em
tend to last
de
about
forma
90
média.
minutes on
E você
average.
pode ter de 4 a
And you may
5
have 4 to
pessoas
5
que dormem
those
8
who sleep for
horas.
about 8 hours.
É importante que a gente, Adri, por favor, pode passar para o seguinte, tá?
And
É
it's important
importante que a gente comece falando sobre o
that we
sono,
start talking about sleep
porque é da higiene do sono
because it is
e como
through
nós vamos nos
this sleep
colocando na hora de
and how we
dormir,
prepare ourselves
que
for
também
sleep
vai estar a
that
qualidade
will help
de
dictate
todas as trocas
the quality of
espirituais
the
e
spiritual and
psicológicas,
psychological
sem se falar da
exchanges
restauração
we are going to
física.
have during sleep, not
Então, é
to
muito
mention
importante
the
esse
restoration
momento.
of our physical
Vai
bodies.
variar também esses
These
estágios
stages will
de
also
acordo com
vary
outras
according
questões,
to
como
other
a
questions such
idade, a
as
própria
age,
temperatura do
temperature in the
ambiente,
environment,
alimentação, os distúrbios do
what
sono,
food we ate
as
before,
medicações.
sleep
O
disturbances,
fato
medications we may take.
que cada um de
But the
nós,
fact
dentro
is
da nossa
that each one of
realidade,
us within our
podemos
reality
sempre fazer
can
algo
always do
para
something
melhorar esse
to
momento,
improve
em que
this
não é
moment,
só um
which is
momento em
not
que o
just a
corpo
moment
descansa
in which the body
e precisa
rests.
desse descanso. É
It is
momento
also a
realmente de
moment
muitas trocas, como
of
nós vimos.
many exchanges, as we
Então,
mentioned.
esse sono
So,
que não REM
so
ou
this
o não
non-REM
aos
sleep, this
sonhos,
dreamless
ele é a maior parte
sleep,
desse ciclo. E
is the
aí
greatest part of the cycle.
nós não vamos nos ocupar de
And
cada
we won't
fase,
necessarily
mas
spend a
vai
lot of
desde
time
um
in
dormir
it.
muito
And we won't necessarily
superficial,
talk about the
que é
different
mais
stages, but it
profundo,
goes from a very
onde
superficial
existem
phase
muitas
to a
trocas
deeper one.
também, mas realmente no
But it really
estágio
is
de sono REM
in the
que
REM
ocorrem então
state
os sonhos
that we have the opportunity
visões
to
em
dream and
geral,
have these out-of-body
certo?
experiences, so to speak.
Então, a partir daí,
So
eu vou
from
passar um pouco agora
this,
para
from
Adriana,
here, I'm going to pass
seguindo
this to
que nós
Adriana
combinamos de nos
because we
intercalar
agreed that
para
we
que
were
vocês
going to take
não
turns
enjoam
so
de
that we may
nós.
not, so you may not get
E a gente vai assim
tired of
fazendo
just
as
one of us.
trocas, ok?
Olá, é realmente
Hello.
uma grande alegria estar
I'm
aqui
really
com
happy to be
todos
here with you
para falarmos de tema tão
to talk
interessante,
about
tão
such an interesting
envolvente, que é os
theme
sonhos
and
e
topic,
que
which is
nos envolve
dreams,
desde
which
a antiguidade,
which
né? Desde os
is
primeiros
pertinent
momentos em
since
que
all
o
of
homem está na
antiquity.
Terra. Ele se
Since from the
pergunta
beginning of
sobre a
time, we have
questão do
asked
sono
ourselves
e dos sonhos,
about sleep and
e
dreams.
Kardec não foi
And
diferente.
Kardec was
A
no
codificação
different.
kardeciana,
In
um dos
the
itens
Spiritist
que
codification,
debruça de forma
Kardec
bastante
spends
intensa
a good
é
amount of
sobre
time
o questionamento que ele faz
on
aos
questioning
espíritos
the
a
spirits
respeito dos nossos sono e como
about
isso
sleep and
acontece. E
dreams
nós vamos
and how that
ver
takes
em
place.
vários
And we will
momentos, várias
see
partes da
in many different parts
codificação,
of the Spiritist
parte
codification
desse estudo
that this
que
study
ele dá o nome de
reemerges. And he
emancipação
calls it the
da alma.
emancipation of the
E
soul.
aqui a gente vai
And
começar no
so
livro dos
here we're going
Espíritos,
to start with the
quando
Spirit's
ele
book when he
pergunta na
asks
questão
on questions
401,
401,
ele diz assim, ele pergunta para a
he asks
espiritualidade.
spirituality.
Durante o
During the
sono,
dreams,
a alma repousa como
does
corpo?
the soul
Ou
rest
seja,
like the
o
body?
corpo está
So we
lá,
know that the
como a
body
Guadalupe disse,
says
dormindo,
resting, as
tranquilo.
Guadalupe mentioned.
E a
But
alma,
how
como
about
é
the
que fica
soul?
esse espírito
How do our
nesses momentos
spirits
em que
fare
o
in these
sono
moments when
acontece, em que
the
o
sleep is
corpo
taking
está se
place, when the body
refazendo,
is
os
restoring
sistemas
itself,
estão se
and when our
regulando
organic
e o
systems
espírito como
are
está? E
reaching
a
equilibrium
resposta
again?
é muito clara
And the
e
answer
é
is very
curta.
clear and
Os
even
espíritos
short.
dizem,
The
e
spirits
aí?
say,
O
no,
espírito
a
jamais
spirit is
está
never
inativo.
inactive.
Durante o sono, a
The
fronte
bonds
dos
which
laços
unite the spirit to the
do corpo,
body are
não
relaxed during sleep.
precisando este
And as the
interagir
body
com a
does not
presença,
need its
ele se
presence,
lança no
it
espaço
travels
e
through
entra em
space
relação
and
mais
enters
direta
into
com
more
o
direct
corpo.
relation with
E
other
aqui na
spirits.
imagem,
So what you
nós
can see
estamos
here in
vendo,
the
né, o
images,
corpo, a matéria
you can
aqui
see the
debilitada,
body
e aí
and
logo
a
acima do
representation of the
princípio já se
spirit,
desdobrando,
an out of
o
body
braço
experience, and there is a silver cord connecting
e
both.
depois o momento em que
And
o
later
corpo
on,
desdobra e
you
ele
see in the
alcança
picture
o
a moment
que
where the spirit is
Kardec
free and reaches this point which Kardec calls emancipation of the soul, which is the moment of a relative freedom, so to speak. It's not absolute because that freedom, that absolute freedom would be death. And so in the book Genesis, there are two chapters, chapter 14 and 15, in which he works this emancipation of the soul further, how it happens, and so forth. And in the beginning of chapter 14, he says he will define the emancipation of the soul. Emancipation of the soul is that detachment of the incarnate spirit, allowing it to temporarily separate from the physical body. And this emancipation of the soul is a phenomena that can occur in various situations or circumstances of human life, including sleep. So it's interesting for us to say here that it's not just during sleep that the spirit is able to detach, so to speak, or emancipate itself. There are other instances in which the spirit is able to do this. The spirit can do this out-of-body experience in a conscious way, but it will have to work on this through many different moments, and we see that in the spiritist codification. But today, we will focus on how that phenomena takes place during sleep. And it's also important for us to highlight this point that Adriana shared with us. This is just a piece of a more comprehensive conversation. And so it's important for us to understand that this meeting that we're having today are not as comprehensive, and there are other approaches, and that we may not have enough time to address all of them. And this will be important, especially when we talk about the kinds of dreams later on today. Because sometimes our sleep life is not as stratified as the questions that Adriana brought forth. They're not always very stratified, very differentiated. So it's not only during the sleep that we can feel this emancipation of the soul. We have many beautiful examples of these out-of-body experiences, which sometimes we call detachment, spiritual detachment. But we need to give context to what we are touching upon today. And so it's important for us to have this critical sense and understand that the topic goes well beyond what we will be able to broach here today. And in the Genesis, then, the topic goes on, and there are many interesting topics that connect to our interest today. And we can see that even though during life, the spirit may be still connected to the body, it does not find itself to be enslaved, as not to be able to escape a little bit, so to speak, whether it be on Earth or in space, so to speak. And so this explanation continues that the spirit is attached to the body, much to his chagrin, because the normal life, the greater life, really is one of liberty, of spiritual liberty. And that life of physical life is of that person who's enslaved. Of course, it is true. And we have here this image symbolically representing the process. The spirit partially free, but still attached to the physical body. It is true, but when we look at things through the lens that Joanna de Angelis invites us to investigate, we can also see this moment here on earth in a much more pleasant way than just what is implied by this text. We know through Joanna and also through the works of Andrea Lewis and other spirits that the greatest happiness of spirits that already have a certain degree of greater consciousness, one of the great fulfillment is to serve. And here on earth, in many different ways, Joanna de Angelis teaches us that we're not in a prison. And she also calls us to think about earth as a great school. So even this perspective she brings, these ideas of out-of-body experiences and detachment, it is more loving in her approach, I would say. Which does not mean that the Genesis does not describe what's happening, because our greater life really is not here on earth. But what I hope is that we make use of this experience and this time that we have here on earth and drink from life to the very last drop from a symbolic perspective, that we may not place ourselves here as prisoners, but as students who are learning. Anyways, I digress. But how can we ascertain the effects of a spirit's liberty during sleep? Another question that we see in the Spirit's book. And the spirits answer through dreams, and see how important that perspective is. You can be sure that when the body rests, the spirit has more faculties than when awake. He has the memory of the past and sometimes a foreknowledge of the future. He gains more power and can communicate with other spirits, either in this world or in another. And I think if we go up a little bit here on our slides, no, that's correct. So we see again the importance of things that we sometimes think are small. So what TV series or movie do we watch before we go to sleep? Where are our thoughts before we go to sleep? And how about that blue light from our cell phones and mobile phones? Or did we drink coffee before going to sleep? These small things of our day-to-day life that may not seem to interfere with the quality of our sleep, but they do. And we continue here with a phrase from Emmanuel. Tell me what you're thinking, and I'll tell you who you walk with. And if we bring this to sleep, we can also leverage that sentence, because whatever it is our heart, there is our treasure. So more than these very material questions that I brought, like the food you ate, screen time, coffee, we also have our inner world. Where is my world? What am I spending my time on and worrying about? Because depending on these, I will place myself in different places in the spiritual realm, connecting to that which I think is good or not as good. So this inner work of self-discovery, it is very important, because we cannot hide during sleep. When we're here on earth, we have our persona, we know how to disguise ourselves, and not necessarily in a bad way, but not expose ourselves, not share our insecurities. But during sleep, we are spirits in detachment. And so we continue here. Often you say, I had a strange dream, a dreadful dream. It's often a memory of places and things you have seen. The body being numbed, the spirit tries to break its chain by searching in the past or the future. Searching for that which we connect to. Or maybe what we are not able to acquire during the day, we seek for it at night. And it's interesting, right, Guadalupe, that when we see that Kardec codified Spiritism, was at the end of the 19th century. And we did not yet have Freud with the theory of sleeps, of dreams. And here the spirits already bring this issue, talking about past, present, and future, because we do also have dreams that potentially could predict the future. And through psychology, and more specifically with the psychology that Joanna de Angelis brings to us, we understand that in our unconscious, past, present, and future are together. But just to mention how interesting it is that spirituality and spiritism is ahead of the conventional thinking and science of the time. And to this day, we have spiritism still strong. And people may say, oh, we may have to update Kardec. But actually, Kardec is pretty up to date. And the spirits respond to us, bringing these answers that are atemporal, that transcend time. And that past, present, and future are very connected. And that's why that dreams, and we'll see the kind of dreams later, we may have a predictive dream. It can bring me a memory from the past, because in this world of spirits, time is different. The time of ego has a linear form. I was born in such a year and I will die in such a year. But in the spirit world, this time, it's circumvolutive. It's different. They're connected. And we may transit between those. So it's very beautiful, this part here, which spirituality explains this. And this question 402, this explanation goes on, where we get to learn that sleep partially frees the soul from the body. And he goes on to explain that's exactly why the spirits agree to incarnate. Because in the spiritual realm, there's always a fear to return into matter, into the physical body. And you have to forget the past, which is a law of nature. But during this emancipation of the soul during sleep, we gain some sense of identity again, and how important it is for that spirit to know that it will nourish itself from where it is. If it's a more enlightened spirit, it will seek full contact with a more enlightened spirits during sleep. The opposite is also true, of course. Perhaps participating in activities and things that are in connection to what they deem important. So he tells us in this question, when we sleep, we are temporarily in the state we will permanently occupy after death. And this is great because we see that we don't need to be afraid of death, because we basically die every day. The difference is, and the only difference is that we're still connected to our physical bodies during sleep, and we return to our physical body, which does not take place during death. Such spirits, then we continue, when the spirits sleep and they travel, They converse and learn with other spirits.
Ele pode conversar, ele pode pedir
They can ask for
conselho,
advice, they can
eles
go
trabalham
study,
mesmo em obras
they can work
que
in
lhe declaram
projects,
concluídas. Ele vai trabalhar, ele vai beber em
they
fontes
even work on tasks which they find
muito profundas,
completed
e
upon
aqui
dying.
ele
So
fala que é
they
exatamente
say that
isso
this is the reason why we should not be afraid of death.
E na sequência, ele
And
vai
continuing,
trazendo, né, ainda na
Kardec
402,
brings
uma
us.
pergunta maravilhosa, hoje não durma,
And by the way, question
releia essa
402 is a
pergunta,
wonderful question. Don't go to sleep before rereading this one. It's a really great
Então
question
ele
and
fala,
complex.
enquanto
He says,
beber de fontes
and while some
frutíferas,
may
que vão
drink
estudar,
from
que vão
clean
trabalhar,
sources, others
outros mundos inferiores,
may
onde
go
eles
to lower worlds
mesmo, né? Onde eles chamam velhas
where they
amizades,
may
ou seja,
connect
com seus
with
amigos do passado,
friends from the past,
de gozos
seeking
ainda
pleasure
mais
perhaps
altos do que os da Terra.
less evolved than the
Vão
ones
beber em
currently on
bebidas
Earth.
ainda mais vis e mais funestas do que as que nós já temos
They
na Terra.
embrace
Então,
doctrines even more vile, more ignoble, and
cada
more harmful than
realmente
those
seguindo suas
that we
obras,
see
e
today.
realmente os locais é da nossa escolha. Por isso que a
That
gente
is
vê
why
que até mesmo no
through the
sono
effect of sleep,
existe o
we
livre-arbítrio. Nós
see
podemos
that there
escolher que
is
fonte nós vamos buscar.
free will.
E vamos dar continuidade a 402, né, Guadalupe?
And we continue with question
A
402.
402 é um pouco o que nós estávamos comentando.
And this question,
Enquanto
402,
vocês têm a oportunidade de ler,
is what
né,
we're
tá
saying
no
is
slide,
as you're able to read
algo
the
que eu acho
slides,
interessante a gente
it's also interesting for
comentar
us
é
to
que isso tudo é muito
say that all of this is very
dinâmico.
dynamic.
Ou seja,
That
justamente nós
is,
reencarnamos
we
para
reincarnate
trabalhar essas más
to work on
inclinações.
these proclivities,
Então,
these bad
enquanto
habits that we may
se o
have.
sono é ensaio para a
If
morte,
sleep is
como se
a
nós
rehearsal
morrêssemos e
for death,
revivêssemos
where we
a cada
die and
ciclo
are
de
rebirth
sono
in
e
every
vigia,
cycle of sleep
também
and
é uma
awakeness,
demonstração
it is
do amor
also
divino,
a
porque
demonstration
a
of
cada
divine love,
ciclo de
because
sono e
through
vigília
each one
tem
of these
uma
cycles, we have
oportunidade
an
de
opportunity
nós
to
repensarmos
rethink
e refazermos o nosso
and
caminho. Então, na
retrace our
prática,
steps moving
né, vamos
forward.
supor que eu tenha
So
base, vamos supor,
let's
não,
pretend,
não estamos aqui por acaso,
right?
né? Mas assim, eu vou, hoje eu
Let's say
dormi
that today
e fui lá
I
num
went to
lugar,
sleep and I
né,
went to
num
a place when I was
deslocamento
out of body,
que não era
which
interessante,
wasn't great,
compactuei com
and
irmãos
I connected
equivocados
with
assim como eu,
brothers and sisters
mas
who are
isso
mistaken
me
like I
acordei,
am, and
né?
I
Tive um
awoke.
sono e acordei, mas eu já acordei com
But I woke up
com
with a
incômodo,
certain
com algo
discomfort,
me dizendo
something telling
que
me
eu
that
precisava
I
mudar
needed to change.
definitivamente muitas vezes. Isso, por linhas às vezes muito
And
tortas,
sometimes in very
acaba
difficult
nos
ways,
trazendo
this may bring us the
oportunidades da gente
opportunity
refazer o
for
nosso
us to
caminho.
decide
Então,
to
nesse exemplo,
redirect
fui lá
ourselves.
para um lugar
Another
onde
example,
se bebia
perhaps I went to a
muito, se
place
usava
where we drank a lot
drogas,
and we used drugs,
porque era isso que
because
eu
that's
fazia na
what I
hora
used to
ali.
do in a previous life.
Acordei,
And
como se
I
diz, não acordei
awoke
legal,
not
acordei
happy,
incomodada, não sei
bothered
por quê.
by something. And what did I do?
Encontrei
I
uma amiga, um amigo,
found a
que me
friend,
convidou a
her,
ir a uma
and they
igreja,
invited me to
ao
go
centro
to a church or a
espírita,
spiritist
a um
group
centro
or a Buddhist
budista,
temple
algum
or
lugar
someplace
onde essa pessoa se
where this
sente
person
bem.
feels good.
E ali eu me
And
senti
there I
bem.
felt good as well.
Eu retorno para minha
So I
casa
returned home,
e no meu próximo
and in
sono
my next moment of
eu já
sleep,
tenho aquele
I
respaldo
have the
de que pode
support
ser
and
diferente.
experience that it
Eu
could
volto
be different.
apaziguada.
I have
E
been
ali
appeased a
eu já
certain way.
consigo naquela noite
And that
não
night,
ir
I am
para
now
esse
able
lugar.
not to go back to that unhealthy
Talvez ir
place
para
I
uma
went
colônia de
before.
tratamento.
Perhaps I go to a
Talvez
spiritual colony
encontrar alguém que me
where
mande
I can find some
mensagem.
support or connect with somebody who
Veja
may send me a
que eu
message.
criei uma
See,
historinha
I've
fictícia
created a fictitious
para que a
story
gente
so that we
entenda
may
que a todo
understand that at
momento
every moment
é oportunidade de
we
nós
have an opportunity
mudarmos,
to
de
change
nós
and for us to
escolhermos
choose
progredir
progress
junto com a lei do amor.
in side by side
E
with the law
mesmo
of
que a
love.
gente, num primeiro
Even if we go to these unhealthy places where we may have some affinities from the past, every day we still have a chance to choose our path anew again. So much the same way that reincarnation is a way for us to redirect our path, the cycle of sleep and conscience is also. And at every moment we have a choice. Sometimes we choose intuitively, but at every moment there is this greater force that governs us and that we surrender and body and soul to the idea of wanting to improve ourselves and give our best to the world, this opportunity will come. And the place where we will go during dreams and out of body will be different. And so question 402 continues, and it brings to us that the dream is a memory of what the spirit has seen during sleep. Notice, however, that you don't always dream. What does that mean? Because not only you remember what you have seen. A lot of people say, oh, I don't dream. No, maybe more likely is that you don't always remember it. It's often only the memory of the confusion that accompanies your departure or return. And so we begin to notice that these absurd dreams we may have often have a meaning that in words we may not be able to define, but who may little by little propel us to change. However, we need to choose. Much the same way we can go to these places that are perhaps unhealthy in the spiritual realm, we can also go to places that help us grow. This affinity is not by chance. It's not the bad spirits who attract us to them. It is us who, by affinity with them, go to these places. And then, yes, these less evolved spirits may take advantage of these dreams to torment us. But the truth is, we are the ones who torment ourselves. So this awareness that I can change, and that if I feel vulnerable, I can ask for help because I will be given, I can pray. It's very important. So that we don't stay with this idea, sometimes so childish, that we are taken against our will someplace. We are heirs of ourselves, and we are gods. And so in practice also works. We need to be vigilant in regards to our thoughts and have a sincere desire to change, take responsibility for our actions, and to be coherent in what we do and take responsibility for our actions are very important when it comes to what dreams are and what they mean. And I wonder if you want to bring something else to this part, Adriana. And it's interesting here that we can share with you what Kardec is bringing us, because we have been talking about this. But in question 402, he continues to say that dreams are the result of the soul's emancipation. They lead to a kind of indefinite clairvoyance. And it's interesting because Joanna explains to us that ego has these foggy lens. And so when we wake up, it's hard for us to have this indefinite clairvoyance to understand if I was in this horrible place that I dreamt about, participating in that environment, or perhaps working to better it. I remember once, for instance, oh, I visited such a place and I did such a thing. And I used to ask myself, where do I go where I sleep? And I asked, I would like to remember where I go when I'm out of my body at night. And I dreamt of a horrible place and I cried. I want to go there anymore. I don't want to remember these things. The law of forgetfulness is important. And after a couple of weeks during our mediumship work, the being who we went to seek for manifests and describes that place and describes that people went there. And I remember the people whom he described. So it's very interesting because sometimes this indefinite clairvoyance cannot be fully interpreted by our ego. And that's why we wanted to search in Kardec and augmenting it with the Joanna to show the different kinds of dreams. Because sometimes we say, I dream with this is what it means. No, we want to show that there are different types of dreams and that we need to try to understand these images and why they happen. Because it is this indefinite clairvoyance. The ego needs to learn how to relate to these images and to learn to speak the language of dreams, which is symbolic. Dreams are seldom literal. They're only literal in this predicting sleep because by the nature of it. But outside of that, there's always be very symbolic. That's why the spirits explain to Kardec that there is this indefinite clairvoyance that extends to most distant places or ones that have never been seen, and sometimes even different worlds. Remember, for instance, Andrew Lewis in Nosolar sharing with us how many people who are still incarnate went to visit Nosolar. And even in the next book, The Messengers, he was able to distinguish who they were by this silver cord, who were in detachment, an out-of-body experience, going to spiritual colonies. So see how interesting it is that there is a possibility that this out-of-body experience may vary greatly. And that it can also, during dreams, access the memory for events that have happened before, because we know that our unconscious is atemporal and everything is different. So you can see how the spirits have already brought this in the 1850s, much before current science acknowledges it. Question 407, Kardec asks, is complete sleep necessary for this emancipation of the spirit? And we talked about this before. No. Sometimes we can have a moment of torpor, or perhaps you are daydreaming and our ego lowers itself and we can access images or memories. I had a vision while awake. These are different states of emancipation of the soul. So it's important for us to see that the spirits here tell us that all we need here is a small weakening of the ego, that it settles down a little bit, and this consciousness comes up. This lowering of the egoic mental level, so to speak. Well, so how does it work? Can the activity of the spirit during the body's rest or sleep cause fatigue to the body? Yes. Here we see the explanation. How many times do we return from sleep replenished, full of energy, and we wake up well, and sometimes not. Sometimes we're fatigued without knowing why. And not necessarily because we had an ill slept night.
Próximo, Adri, vou passar pouco mais rápido para a gente chegar onde eu imagino que
and we're going to go forward a little bit so that we can get to the piece that might be more interesting to people. And here we arrive in the question of psychology. And around the 1900s, we have Freud bringing this research in this book of his, which is very interesting, The Interpretation of Dreams. And for him, the dreams are the realization of an unconscious desire. Jung also brings this idea of the unconscious, but for him, dreams can express ruthless truths. He ends up going broader on the issue of dreams and conscious than Freud does, and of course has his value too. But Jung broadens it, saying that dreams can bring these truths, these philosophical statements, these illusions, these unbridled fantasies, memories, plans, anticipations, and even telepathic visions. And so we see here a larger perspective about dreams. And we see these archives from the collective and personal that begin to emerge during dreams as memories and different dramas, but very symbolic in many different ways, so that we may be able to resolve these conflicts that afflict us. So the same dream seen today. Let's pretend that I had a specific dream today. If I look at my dream today and looking at my dream 6 months from now, or even less, it may already have a different meaning. Not that one may be better than the other, or that it may cancel the other, but dreams are also symbolic, and that is important that we understand, because the more I gain in consciousness and I learn about my own reality, my internal psychological, spiritual reality, more I will be able to look at this manifestation of the unconscious with a broader perspective. Of course, one does not invalidate the other, but that's also very beautiful and very interesting. And here's where I draw a parallel to the entire message of Jesus in his parables, that everything is there. The things were already shared. The truth is already there for us as a picture or a film, when we talk about dreams. But we have to have eyes that see. We have to have the consciousness and awareness to understand what the symbolism brings us. And I want to bring it to you, Adriana, because this is very comforting. It's a very clear image of divine love for us, because unconscious only brings us that which we're able to handle. It could be that in the very dream that I saw an enchanted prince in a white steed, 6 months from now, I may notice that prince is a frog or a dragon, and that the horse wasn't really taking the prince and was really leading a truth that I'm not able to withstand. That's because I expand my perspective according to what I'm able to understand. And so that's very present in dreams. And that's why sometimes we don't recall our dreams. Not that it's the only reason we don't recall our dreams, but we have the sensation that we may be awakened at some point in time. So this care that creation has with us, I find of such a beauty and a delicate feeling that it's hard to put into words. And here we are. We reached the type of dreams. We reached a point where we want to spend more time understanding what kind of dreams are there. And if we read this question, 407, Kardec talks about these. Only after I studied this book, this Spiritist book, it's called Dreams, Interpretation from the Psychology and Spiritist Perspective, from Argolo, he brings this. But if we look at that question, Kardec has already defined this, but he doesn't name them, he just explains them. And so if we look at these types and go back in the Spirit's book, and Kardec in general will find it. So we're just going to talk about these types of dreams, and we will quickly go through them and how they happen. So we have 7 types of dreams here. The first ones are dreams induced by physiological stimuli. So basically, they're strictly physiological, our relationship with our physical bodies. Then we have those who are exclusively psychic, in which the ego needs to relate to the psychic structure. Then we have the dream of the emancipation of the soul dreams, and this is the one that Kardec explained in quite a bit of detail. Then we have those predicting dreams, these premonitory dreams about the future, that the future is brought forth. And it's important to say it's not for us to change the future, but for us to prepare for that event that's already there. It's not a fatality, but is a way of preparing yourself from then. Oh, but I dreamt that this person was going to go to an accident and they died. I should have done something. No, you don't have to do anything. You just have to prepare yourself. Because sometimes in our clinics, right, we see many people suffering who somehow may have had some knowledge of the future and feel very guilt about it. Then we also have mediumistic dreams. We have dreams from past experiences, and we have unpleasant dreams and nightmares. So let's talk briefly about these types of dreams. The first one is this one. Dreams induced by physiological stimuli. And sometimes our body suffers because we still have our habits, an overdrive in sexuality or in eating. Sometimes we eat some really heavy food and then you go to sleep and you dream that you were suffering. So these dreams, as the name indicates, they really are going to reflect an organic problem. A full stomach, or maybe we drank too much alcoholic beverages and the body dehydrated and they need water and they dream that they're drinking water. So the dreams leading the way, like drink water because you need it. And here Kardec uses an expression. He says a very interesting term, which I can't fully recall. But in general lines, he says that these dreams reflect organic problems that preoccupying the dreamer's minds. And during such dreams, the spirit, despite being outside the physical body, remains inactive. It's the moment, and instead of the spirit going elsewhere for this freedom, he is close to that body. It was so dense and so heavy that this dynamic between body and soul, that the soul is unable to distance itself. And this is from a book, Mechanisms of Mediumship, from Ana Luis. And in these moments, it similarly experiences the consequences of its own excesses, enduring the abuse of the viscera harmed by itself. And this is what I wanted to remember. Or the uneasiness in the organs it has mistreated. So you can see how we have challenges in which our instinct's still very strong.
E nós temos, né? Depois a gente pretende ter tempo.
And later we'll have, we hope that we have some time for questions and responses.
Sonhos, né, que são
But there's also the second type of dreams, exclusively psychic dreams. They don't have relation to a spiritual detachment. These are questions from our own conscience that arise because of dreams that bring in a symbolic way content that we can work on and work on this inner questions coming from a place where there is a certain detachment, like we're not living the same situation, but we're still faced with the symbolism that needs to be cared for or worked on. It's a very important tool within the Jungian analysis of self-discovery and self-knowledge. And of course, if we understand that the symbol will never really be completely out of meaning, it can also be done in a very light way during day-to-day life, with us trying to get in touch with our dreams and trying to make sense of what those symbols may mean. But in a very structured way, through a lot of study, Jung brings to analysis with a great potential for deepening our understanding. We won't spend a lot of time here in the psychic apparatus, but Dr. von Franz explains that dreams have been considered the royal road to the unconscious. And they bring us this map of our psyche in a very clear way, in a very profound way. And I say clear in an interesting way because it's through this symbolism, and it's the symbolism that becomes larger and larger in meaning. So it's very interesting to work our dreams in that way. And here we're going to see that Jung recognizes that dreams are a form of self-regulation of the psyche, showing aspects of the attitude of our consciousness. How does the ego work and what is attached to? And so the conscious shows the opposite so that we may try to regulate, to search for their opposite. He notices that dreams have a beginning, middle, and end. It is like a story, as if it were a narrative that is developed and with a conclusion that brings the closure to the whole piece. And the question of time and space comes to us in different ways, because in the conscious, that is different than how we experience time here. And what we want to emphasize is a symbolic language. So when I look at an image of a Greek actor cutting the head of Medusa and holding it up high, symbolically speaking, what are we thinking? What was symbolically decapitated? What part of me do I need to separate this reason from this instinctive body? So the images that come in dreams are very symbolic, and that's why Guadalupe brought forth the parables of Jesus, who also leveraged that language of symbolism, and that's why they are timeless. Jesus spoke them so long ago, and they're still very contemporary. They have not yet expired, so to speak, because he uses the language of the unconscious. And here we also see, for somebody who's working through this, to study the need to have a deep understanding of what Jung called the primitive psychology, to be able to highlight this image in a concrete way is this, but symbolically I can draw these parallels. So there's different ways of looking within a literal perspective, but knowing that there is a symbolic piece which is infinitely greater, and we will never really truly explore in its fullness, because I may look at it one way and tomorrow I may look at it a different way, and might update my perspectives, and the way I interpret them might change. And James Hall lists the main points for working with dreams, and he suggests that we write down. He recommends that we expand dreams by means of associations. Like, so what is my father? I dreamt that my father died. He's going to die. So as is obvious, what's the symbolic piece of this? Who's that father to me? Is he castrating? Is it difficult? Is it loving? So if I dream about him dying, maybe referring that a aspect that is castrating in my life that is different may be changing. So you see, we will amplify this perspective, the symbol, and see how it is for me, how it is culturally. Well, I live in this culture and I have this background. Well, how does it relate? And then we take it to a third level, which is the archetypal associations. We'll look at the Medusa, for instance, and cutting the head up. Perseus is the one who cuts the head of Medusa. So who's Perseus? Who was Perseus in mythology? So we look at these different aspects so we can understand this compensation that we do. What is it that our unconscious is trying to compensate for? It's bringing something forth that ego had not have access to. So here we continue with this idea that dreams are serving the process of individuation, of self-discovery, this process that makes us unique and at the same time belonging to a larger consciousness. And we reach this third type of dreams that we talked a little bit about, soul emancipation dreams. And we're going a little bit faster here, so we may have time to have a conversation. And this is emancipation of the soul, in which will happen. And at the end, we see that upon waking, the memory of what was experienced during such dream remains, with the dreaming having absolute certainty of everything that occurred. And Divaldo has shared with us that these are vivid, colorful, and rich in details, and sometimes they are real events when we have this level of detail. But not always. Sometimes we're not sure, absolutely, because we're talking about the ego, and we have to have this go in between to understand. But deep into ourself, the immortal spirit that we are, even if intuitively we know that there might be an out-of-body experience, a dream in which we learn, or in which we share good moments with those we care about, or perhaps going to unhealthy places. Even if we don't have complete certainty, that moment is registered. And sometimes this certainty comes during a different point in life when that experience we'll have will be able to provide additional context, as if it were an inner voice that we are hearing, and which many times comes from a dream of this kind. We'll have certain examples, but I don't think we need to go through this. Here, we also see another interesting question from Kardec. When Kardec asks if can two people who are acquainted with each other visit one another in sleep? And for those who may be away from their families, it's a good thing for us to know. And the answer is yes. And this is very common, extremely common. And they say that almost every night we have these experiences. And we say, but I don't remember. Because it would also depend the moment of sleep in which the dream was there. Sometimes if it's right in the beginning, our brain may not be able to register that experience. We also need the brain apparatus to register that dream so that we can remember it. And so it's possible that we don't register that. But at every night we dream. And yes, we can rendezvous with our loved ones and bring new knowledge. And that is very important and brings us a certain sense of comfort. How great it is to be able to visit with those who I miss. Then we have another type of dream, the premonitory dreams, those who predict the future. And it's very normal for us to dream with events that have not yet taken place. And here Jung brings here a vision for us. That's why we're talking about that it's also possible to have these moments while awake. Jung was observing different passages, and he has a vision of a blood-filled ocean, and then later on, not too late, World War II comes. See how he tapped into that collective unconscious and has a premonitory dream. Many psychologists have, for instance, are doing research now about what kinds of dream people had before the COVID pandemics, to see that as well. And so this question is explained by the linear time of consciousness is different to that time of the unconscious. Adriana, I think it would be interesting to perhaps skip over these two because I'm worried about our time. And I think it's important for us to move forward. And you have access to these slides, and you can always go back and look at them. So here we have the mediumistic dreams. So in this part of mediumistic dreams, we can find these dreams in which there's direct interference from discarnate spirits. This is a dream that is in which a specific spirit will interact with the dreamer. So, for instance, we had an example of Jung dreaming of his father when his mother was about to discarnate, and Jung's father asked him to speak about the psyche of relationships. If we think about our own dreams, we'll be able to notice that perhaps these are family members trying to bring us information, as Adriana had shared before. I, for one, remember, for instance, a time in my life in which I had lots of dreams in which I was studying, and then later I had many dreams that I was teaching.
Só que em momentos que também eu estava fazendo
But in moments I was also
pós-graduação,
going through,
aquilo. Então,
you
aí
know,
também vem
study
uma
work.
questão que eu acho interessante comentar.
And another
Durante
point here to us to
pouco,
comment,
né, eu não vou me
and
deter
I'm
nos
not
meus
going to
sonhos, mas
spend a
tinha
lot of time in my dreams,
desencarnados
but there were
juntos,
also people who were
eles
discarded in
eram
my dreams.
mediúnicos,
To what
ou
extent were
eles
they
eram
mediumistic,
uma
or were they
compensação ou uma
a
complementariedade do
complementation,
meu dia a dia?
a complementing of my day to
Eu não
day?
tenho certeza,
I can't really
né?
tell
Porque eu não sou tão grande
because
assim
I'm not
enquanto espírito.
able to, as a
Mas
spirit to discern,
aceitar esse sonho
but
e
to accept
olhar
these dreams
todas as
and look at all the
possibilidades,
possibilities.
esse é o nosso
That is
papel.
our role.
E a partir daí a
And
gente
from
se
there on, we
posiciona
can
no
relate
que
to
é mais
them and
importante
grapple with them.
do que se é mediúnico, do que se tem a ver com o meu dia a dia,
Because
e
whether
me
it
relacionar
mediumistic,
com ele.
whether it is mediumistic or
Tentar,
if it has to do with my day to day, the important
movimento
thing
de
is for me
entrega
to relate
a
to it,
essas
ponder it,
imagens,
and
simplesmente
investigate these images
perceber o que que elas querem
and
me
try to
dizer
figure out
e
what is it that they're
dialogar
telling me
com elas.
and have this dialogue
Porque
with
senão a
them.
gente fica querendo
So
estratificar,
otherwise,
mas
we
não
try to separate things
perde
so
a
much and we
oportunidade
miss the
de
opportunity to
ouvir,
listen.
né? Porque seja mediúnico,
Because
seja
whether they are
premonitório,
premonitory or
seja um
mediumistic,
resíduo do meu
or
dia a
perhaps
dia,
just a
é
memory of my day
uma
to day,
imagem, é uma
it is an
mensagem que
image,
me
it is a
diz.
message that relates to
Então, o que que
me.
ela está me
So what is
falando?
that this image is
Então,
telling
isso
me?
também acho
What is the message for me? And
interessante
that's what interesting.
a gente pontuar, né?
And I think it's important to highlight that.
E aqui, maneiras, né, da
And
gente
here's some
diferenciar
ways in which we can
o
tell these
sentimento de
dreams apart.
absoluta realidade
The
do
feeling of absolute
evento.
reality of
Nossa,
the
essas
event.
cores são tão
Sometimes the
vívidas,
colors are
mas
so
a gente
vivid
percebe que
that
aquilo
really
não
feels
é
like
daqui.
that this is not from here.
Normalmente é relatado como se fosse uma visão,
It is usually reported
algo
as if it were a
concreto, não uma
vision.
simples miragem,
It's
com essa
real.
riqueza de
There's this
detalhes.
concrete and not a
Então, é
symbol,
claro que existem
a mirage,
alguns
emblematic
indícios
image.
de sonho
And
mediúnico.
so it presents a wealth
Muitas
of
vezes a gente vai
details.
ter certeza
Sometimes we have this
absoluta,
absolute
mas que a
certainty,
gente não se perca
but
em
we
ter ou não
may
certeza
not be lost
absoluta
in seeking for that
e que
certainty
viva
and
aquilo que
instead
se
live that
apresenta
which is
a nós,
presented to
né?
us.
Acho que isso é importante.
Isso. Aí a gente vai para o sonho de vidas passadas, que também é.
And here we go to
eu
dreams
acho
of
que
past
essa
lives.
impressão, né, que fica
And this
é que
impression
você
that stays
realmente
with
vê um
us
outro
is
tempo,
that
um
we
outro
see a
tipo de
different time, a different
construção,
kinds of
ele
buildings,
vestido de,
you
né, dessa
dressed as
ordem de
a different
mulher,
way,
ele
perhaps in
fala
a different
assim, então
gender.
é como se eu tivesse
It is as
lembrando,
if I were
ou
recalling or
revisitando esses
revisiting
locais.
places.
Então também mostra, então assim como o sonho premonitório
Much the same way the premonitory dream talks about the future, here I return to the past with a richness in detail that is high. Here, for instance, we can cite Humberto de Campos and the spirit Maria Dolores as when they are writing their books, they visit this past. And so we see Humberto de Campos' books, he will describe that grass with a specific color and the wind that touched our skins. How can he do this if he hasn't really lived that and revisit that? So it is the emancipation of the soul too. And last, we have the unpleasant dreams, nightmares. And these are important because they can have a psychic cause, or where I go, and when I'm coming in touch with a shadow, when I get in touch with my repressed issues, or whether it is a harassment of other spirits, which we sometimes call obsession, which I feel that. So that's how we differentiate, because against the ego has these foggy lenses that cannot always differentiate between them. But it's important for us to think about the nightmares and these two different causes. And here we then arrive at this importance of preparing for sleep. And the Brazilian medium Divaldo Franco invites us to the idea that we must really prepare for sleep. Do you want to talk a little bit more about this, Guadalupe? I find this to be so important because it's so practical. And we even know rationally, and I don't think we're going to be bringing anything new here, and even for us, is are we doing this? Are we praying? Are we reading something enlightening before we sleep? Limiting the amount of exposure to negative thoughts or TV, and leaving behind the day-to-day with its own questions and challenges, and having a chance to understand that our spiritual reality is much larger than the small pieces that come to us, and that in the cycle of sleep and awakeness, life go on. And so to be prayerful and vigilant is important. And in the practical sense, there's so many different things, from what we eat, as we spoke about before. And it doesn't mean that you have to have, a perfect eating habits, but perhaps take care of not to drink too much liquid before going to sleep, or eating too heavily, or maybe let our phone off or away an hour before sleeping, and even TV. News and all the thoughts that we generally ruminate, all of these doing all these things will help us in this moment of detaching ourselves from the physical body and this out-of-body experience. They may even influence the spiritual treatments we may receive, that we may be able to better understand the symbolic messages so that we can work our inner world. So it's very important. And so I want to wrap this up. So I just want to bring this last sentence of Jung. Said, I had first dream that I remember, in which, as it were, occupied me throughout my life. I was 3 or 4 years old. This is an image that came to him when he was 3 or 4. So just to see how important it is, our lives. And how the dream influences much more than we can expect. So it's important for we may look at these images and that they come to us like freshly baked bread in the morning, and we have these images in the morning when we dream that are akin to that.
Acho que dá para tu que está compartilhando, Adri, pode tirar.
And maybe we can take our
e aí para finalizar, gente, nós
off. And to end, we shared a little bit from this book here.
Mas já está traduzido lá no grupo.
And you can see that in our WhatsApp group. And there's a beautiful message by Joanna de Angelis,
trazendo a importância de novo
bringing the importance of mental hygiene and prayer. So I want to close this off bringing a piece of it. The importance of and the need for sleep, and how that is connected to melatonin. And we know the melatonin is produced by our pineal gland. And nowadays, we know that Angelis brought to this as the gland of the mental life, and see how all this is connected. And we can see how studies and information are there.
Então, essa glândula que antes, quando eu fiz a faculdade, era órgão vestigial.
And this gland, in which when I went to school, was just another gland. Now we know how great importance we have, especially as it relates to dreams.
Nesse momento de sono. E todas as funções dele.
And all its functions.
Nós restauramos e temos
and we come back here, we can have the chance to re-edit and rewrite our lives without erasing who we were, but broadening the people we are.
E nos tornando cada vez mais conscientes, nós nos aproximamos de sentir o amor.
We begin to feel divine love, this cosmic consciousness, and we can serve better our neighbor without the projections of shadow, and be able to do charity and the creation. And so everything is so interconnected that a simple night of sleep is not a simple night of sleep. It's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to change our story for the better. And I would like to finish by bringing the last paragraph of this message in this beautiful book called Moments of Harmony. And it says, the moments preceding sleep are of crucial importance for the time of rest. Therefore, do not neglect the education of your mind, the maintenance of healthy habits and edifying plants, so that all your hours may be profitable for your inner growth and beautiful existence. And who does not want a peaceful existence, right? So it's up for us to live all of these. I think that's it. Do we have a question?
Nós precisamos encerrar, mas se vocês puderem responder bem rapidinho.
If you can answer very quickly, that'd be great. The question is,
o que determina se podemos ou não lembrar dos nossos
what determines whether we're able to remember our dreams, whether we're awake or not? I wanted to answer quickly because it's even a question of practice. And I joke and I say, it's like a beautiful man. We see them going by and say, oh, what a beautiful man. And the man doesn't pay attention to us. And next day we look again and they go away. At a certain moment, we stop looking. And dreams are like this. They send us images, but if we're not paying attention, if the ego is not paying attention, we don't retain it. So if we decide to develop this movement of looking at the image, we begin to see. And I say, oh, I never dream. And all of a sudden they bring us 8 dreams. And we say, but hold on a second, were you the person who never dreamt? Oh, how funny, I had all these dreams. And so it's a lot of it is an exercise. So we have to get used to look at it. And if you register, if you write it down right afterwards, it's helpful. And sometimes, they go to a clinic to visit us, and then the night before they dream, almost like the conscious knows that they need to do that. So it's an exercise of looking, paying attention, to have really a watch and pray attitude to the images that are coming, right? to really pay attention to the images that are coming to you.
É mais uma questão do ego prestar atenção nisso do que
It's more about the ego paying attention to it than the other way around.
E não se cobrar, né? Estar ali, mas não se cobrar, eu preciso sonhar.
And in not demanding that of
Eu
yourself,
quero,
but
eu estou aqui, eu vou me colocar nesse lugar e porque muitas
and
pessoas
sometimes we
começam a
say,
se
oh, I'm
cobrar e
here.
isso dá errado, né? Mas ter realmente essa atitude diretiva, né? Como a Adriana
And
fala.
sometimes have this approach, right, of trying.
Okay, so thank you very much, Adriana, Guadalupe, Dan, for that very illuminating and inspirational study. Also, I want to thank everyone who contributes tonight with the question and everyone who took part of our study group tonight, and all for those that will watch this video later on. Thanks for being part of this study group. So again, thank you everyone for being here with us tonight, and I wish you all many blessings and a very good evening. Thank you, and I hope to see you soon. Bye for now.